don't think the grieving ever ends. It evolves. We've been wanting to tell Amie's story and just felt like we weren't ready before. But now we feel like we can do it.
I was so proud of her and what she's accomplished.
Oh my goodness. Fire eater, dancer, photographer, model, therapist. She wanted to fix people.
You might want to speak to this woman, Dr. Amie Harwick.
As a licensed marriage and family therapist, I see all kinds of different things, anxiety, depression, change of life stuff, breakups, moves, things like that.
Amie helped me so much. I had gone to see Amie because I had dealt with a relationship that got very out of control and turned into a very serious stalking case.
Jealousy can become dangerous and even lead to violence. It can lead to death.
I want emergency, operator 434.
Yeah, somebody just attacked my roommate. Please get a cop here.
I just was woken up by screaming, like blood-curdling scream. And then I realized that the screaming wasn't stopping or slowing down. And I yelled up, Amie. And I heard choking right after that. I knew we were in trouble. This is for real. This is really happening. I knew we needed help. Like, I'm gonna have to make a break for it.
When the first responders first got that call, where did they go?
They came right here to this house.
Hey, sir. Hi. How can I help you?
My roommate was attacked. I know it. I heard it. She's screaming. She was thrown to the ground.
Okay, hold on. Okay.
Michael Herman was out here. He's frantic. He's nervous.
They didn't know what to think of this guy.
Right. They had no idea of who he was, why he was involved in all this. They knew he was rambling on. They had some doubts about him originally.
I think there's
Okay, sir, do me a favor. Do me a favor. Calm down. Calm down. Other than your roommate, is there anybody else inside the house?
I don't know. Thanks.
And I'm walking them around to the back of the house. And it's dark back there. There's some light, but it's pretty dark back there.
And when they get around to the back, now they can see a body on the ground.
Sir, come here.
I remember not knowing what I was seeing, and afterwards realizing it was Amie.
Really what hit me was the way that she was killed. So heartbreaking that her, of all people, had to be taken in the way that she was.
I said, I know who did it. I just knew it. I was the only person she was afraid of. It's the only one she was ever afraid of.
Take a seat. Take a seat.
Oh my God. Hey, we need it. Oh my God. What happened to you?
In the early morning darkness of February 15, 2020, police body cameras were recording as Amie Harwick, barely clinging to life outside of her Hollywood Hills home, was taken to a hospital.
If she says anything in the hospital, I need to know that.
As EMTs tried to save Amie, officers from the Los Angeles Police Department tried to make sense of the scene. Amie's roommate, Michael Herman, appeared to be the only witness. He told officers an intruder had attacked Amie.
I swear to you, that was a struggle I heard.
But is there any sign of the intruder?
There wasn't.
Scott Masterson was the lead detective.
All we knew when we showed up was that a female was found on the ground in the back of the house. We're wide open to what really went on.
even open to the possibility that this wasn't foul play at all. When officers searched the 3-story house, they found Amie's purse, jacket, and broken necklace on the floor. Not exactly telltale signs of a crime. And a discovery on Amie's balcony made them wonder if this could have been an accident or even suicide.
On the deck of the balcony, we found a medium-sized syringe, and it was loaded with a yellowish-brown substance.
Yeah, it's heroin.
When the officers first saw that, they thought, what, was this some kind of drug deal or incident?
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe she was using drugs and fell over. They didn't know.
Sir, do you know her history of drug use?
No, she's sober. She doesn't drink it. She didn't even drink.
She doesn't drink.
She doesn't even drink. She's sober.
And when I first saw it, I said, that's not heroin.
Not heroin, but he didn't know what it was. But what did you think? Wasn't that odd?
Very odd. Very strange.
And very strange to investigators, says Masterson, was that Michael had blood on his shirt. And although he said he was a roommate, he didn't have his keys to the house when first responders arrived.
They don't know if he's part of the problem, part of the solution.
He might be a suspect, because he's got blood on him.
So, they're thinking, was he in a fight with her?
That was not true. Michael Herman is telling his story publicly for the first time about the events on the night of Valentine's Day, 2020, and into the early hours of the next day.
The word nightmare isn't even a big enough word, is it?
No.
Amie had gone out with friends, and Michael was in his downstairs bedroom.
I'd been mostly nodding on and off. I remember what sounded like a plate drop and being woken up by it.
Thinking it was Amie's cat, he says he fell back asleep. He later woke up to Amie returning home and that blood-curdling scream. He then heard what sounded like Amie being thrown to the floor and later choked.
The sound made you feel that there was someone up with her.
I knew for a fact there was somebody up there after that. I'm trying to listen. You don't know for sure what's going on. Was he acting alone? Was there more than one person? I start rushing to look for my phone.
But Michael says he couldn't find his phone. He then started yelling to scare the intruder.
I remember thinking, like, this is so much worse than any horror movie I've ever seen. You're realizing that to save her, like, you've got to make the decision to leave her. It was such a hard decision.
Michael fled the house to get help, but when he got to the front gate, it was locked. He climbed over a fence, cutting himself on spiked rods. Frantically, he ran to the next-door neighbor's house. That neighbor's surveillance camera shows Michael knocking on the door, but no one answers.
I just kind of panicked, feeling like a lot of time had already passed.
He then ran into someone on the street and used their phone to call 911.
You guys need to get a cop here, quick.
Sir, the officers are on the way.
After spending hours at the scene, investigators found something in the light of day that they had missed before. A broken window from a French door on the ground floor with blood nearby.
And so as soon as we saw that, okay, this is our point of entry. We have a crime here. Somebody broke into this house and did this.
So this was the first piece of evidence that said to you, Mike Herman might be telling you the truth.
Correct.
Later at the Hollywood police station, Michael told Masterson about the person he believed was responsible.
Told them she had an ex-boyfriend that she had had a restraining order against that had expired. I don't know his name, but Robert would know his name.
Robert is Robert Koshland, one of Amie's closest friends. We first spoke to Robert in 2020. He told us what he told police.
They were like, do you know who might have, could have done this? And I was like, yeah, Gareth.
Gareth Pursehouse, an old boyfriend whom Amie had had a troubled relationship with when they dated almost 10 years earlier.
I was like, you need to go find this guy right away.
Masterson then broke the news to Robert and Michael. Amie had died at the hospital. She was 38 years old.
How difficult was it to hear that Amie didn't make it?
It's still difficult to hear.
As investigators worked to find Amie's ex-boyfriend, they also tried to find Amie's parents, Penny and Tom Harwick, in Pennsylvania. The Harwicks remember getting ready for bed when there was a knock at the door. It was the local police.
And he said, Amie's been murdered.
It's a blur right now.
I don't know how to describe it.
Just devastated.
Penny and Tom's life with Amie began when they adopted her as an 11-month-old baby. Do you remember the first time you saw your little girl?
Oh, I absolutely remember. Kind of like a fairy tale. It's like, here's this beautiful little girl sitting there, and she's going to come home with us and be our daughter. It was wonderful.
And believe it or not, she had a head full of curls.
And her hair was honey-colored. By the time she was 4, it was so dark.
Around that same time, the Harwicks adopted their son, Chris.
And she was okay with it for a couple of weeks, and then she said, well, when is he going back? And I said, well, he's not. He's your brother. He's going to be here forever.
How would you describe your sister?
Amie was a very interesting character. She was into heavy metal and rock music, going to concerts.
And Amie got her parents in on the action, too.
She turned Penny and I into metalheads, or headbangers.
Seriously?
Seriously.
And she would always manage to get either backstage or to meet the performers. That's just who she was.
After high school, Amie met Tommy Decker, a drummer from LA, at a local concert. The two began dating long distance.
And then she said, I want to move out there. I want to move out to LA.
In 2001, she headed west. She was 20 years old.
She needed to find out who she was. She needed to do that for herself.
Soon, the couple tied the knot, but after a 3-year marriage, Tommy and Amie divorced. It wasn't until 2009 that Amie would go on to meet Gareth Pursehouse, the man police suspected had killed her, and whom they were now searching for.
Heartbreak for a local neighborhood after a well-known therapist was killed at her Hollywood Hills home.
People have left flowers here for Amie Harwick, and her friends and family are hoping for justice.
I was very confident that, Gareth Pursehouse was our guy.
Within 13 hours of Amie Harwick's death on February 15, 2020, police descended on Gareth Purshouse's beachside neighborhood to arrest him.
You could tell he was playing the old, what's this about? Why do you want to talk? Who? Oh, yeah, I know Amie, sure, yeah. He basically was saying, I've been at home.
Detectives weren't buying that story or the explanation Pursehouse gave for what appeared to be a fresh black eye. He blamed a home renovation.
I said, I think you better get a contractor. If you get a hold of a power tool, you're going to be in real trouble.
Pursehouse was charged with Amie's murder on February 19, 2020. And detectives were learning about his troubled past beginning not long after he and Amie began dating in 2009.
They seemed like a pretty fun couple and kind of nice to see, friends get together.
When we first spoke to Rudy Torres in 2020, he talked about how the couple met. Amie, then working as a model and dancer, would often run into Pursehouse, an events photographer, at flashy LA parties.
If you would meet him, you would think he's charming, a little goofy, kind of dorky.
He wasn't a musician like she normally dated.
No, and she was trying to break that habit.
Pursehouse was also a computer expert and an aspiring comedian.
Here he is, one more time for Gareth, everybody, come on.
I have bad news for the entertainers over there. The best day of your career is going to be the days after you die.
But oddly, says Amie's mother, Penny, her daughter didn't share much else about him. And why do you think that is?
Well, maybe she was already feeling like he wasn't who she thought he was.
And Penny says her daughter never shared how volatile the 2-year relationship had become.
She'd gone through quite a bit with Gareth. There was a number of police reports that were made.
Detectives learned that Amie had called police to report several violent incidents over the years. She said that on multiple occasions, Gareth Pursehouse had choked, suffocated, and punched her with a closed fist, and she even documented her injuries with these photos. But Amy's father, Tom, says Amie didn't share just how bad things had gotten.
She didn't go into details.
Do you think she just wanted to protect the two of you?
Yes, yes.
After Amie ended the relationship, she took steps to protect herself, obtaining a restraining order against Pursehouse in 2012. But while she was trying to distance herself from him, Rudy says Pursehouse could not let her go.
He always wanted to get a hold of her, and I used to tell him that he should just leave her alone, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. And then he cut me off.
In the years after their breakup, Amie told her parents that her home was broken into. On one occasion, strangely, the only things taken were personal photos, and on another, her computer was wiped clean. And did she think it was Gareth?
She did.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But no way of proving.
No way of proving anything. Of course we were worried, but then we also felt like, well, she's done with him. It's over. And it was never over.
And Penny says Amie was thriving, getting a degree to become a licensed therapist.
Hi, this is Dr. Amie Harwick, licensed marriage and family therapist.
Amie posted therapy videos on her social media.
You can seek therapy to address an issue like depression, anxiety, a breakup. You can also seek therapy to be a better you.
But even as Amie focused on helping others, she couldn't quite shake the shadows from her past. She lost a job as a youth counselor, Penny says, after a prospective employer was anonymously sent nude photos of her. Amie believed Pursehouse was behind it.
She was really upset about it, and then she wasn't sure what she was going to do.
Despite that obstacle, Amie studied for a PhD in human sexuality, earning the title doctor. She took a special interest in marginalized groups, sex workers, and vulnerable women. And she doesn't stop. She
bounced right back.
I wrote a book called The New Sex Bible for Women.
No, she didn't stop. She would work with these groups of people that she felt were underrepresented and needed help.
What was Dr. Harwick's reputation?
Dr. Amie Harwick had an amazing reputation. I had a lot of mutual friends that had seen her.
Emily Sears, a model who's graced the cover of Maxim magazine, first started seeing Dr. Amie Harwick in 2017, in part to help her overcome anxiety she had around dating and intimacy.
I felt that she was relatable. Well, I didn't know just exactly how relatable it was.
Even when she opened up to Amie about an abusive ex-boyfriend who had stalked her, Emily says Amie never told her about her own similar experience.
And that still is something that I am struggling to process, knowing that I was sitting across from her and she had been through so much that was similar.
As Amie was helping Emily work through her issues around dating, Amie was taking a chance on a new man in her own life.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Drew Carey, comedian and host of The Price is Right on CBS.
She was obviously really beautiful. She was really smart. She just wanted to help people, especially women.
We spoke to Carey in 2022. He said it wasn't long after meeting Amie at a party that he decided she was the one.
And I said, if this keeps going the way it's going, I'm going to marry her.
And what happened?
What happened was he ended up taking her to Paris on New Year's Eve and proposing to her. And she accepted.
Drew and Amie shared the news on his show soon after.
I'd like to introduce you to my brand new lovely fiance, Amie. How you doing, Amie?
But instead of spending the rest of their lives together, later that year, the couple split up. How did she take the breakup?
She was devastated. I mean, she broke it off. And I think that's because while fame was getting in the way.
That's because, says Penny, Amie feared that with the added public attention she was getting while on the arm of a celebrity, she could be putting herself in danger.
You know who was watching, and it made her worry.
It hit home a lot after Amie passed in the way that she did. How dangerous it really is for women.
Emily Sears, one of Amie Harwick's therapy clients, was shaken by the news of her death.
The reality is we're not safe. Nobody is.
In dealing with some domestic violence, because this was a bit different because the way Gareth Pursehouse acted in this case was more methodical.
When Deputy District Attorney Victor Avila took on the case, he was particularly troubled by evidence that Pursehouse had broken into Amie's house, hoping to catch her off guard when she arrived home.
And that's at the point that we decided to charge not only the murder charge, but also the special circumstance of lying in wait. These are the crime scene notes.
Avila, along with his co-counsel, Deputy District Attorney Catherine Mariano, reviewed surveillance and body camera video, interviews with Amie's family and friends, and compiled a timeline of the events leading up to the murder.
It became very clear to me that his obsession drove his intent to kill her.
They believe that Purshouse's obsession with Amie was ignited when he saw her at this award show about a month before her murder. It was a chance encounter. Pursehouse working the gig as a photographer. Amie smiling for the cameras, enjoying the limelight. But moments earlier, off camera, witnesses say an angry Pursehouse confronted her. Penny Harwick recalls Amie telling her she hadn't seen him in almost a decade.
He called her a bitch and he told her she ruined his life. And she just told me how afraid she was because he was crying and causing a huge scene. And she said, "Mom, I went into therapist mode. I just tried to calm him."
After talking to Gareth for almost an hour, Amie left the event very worried.
What's your reaction, Penny, when she was telling you this?
That's when we talked about security, and she said she was going to get pepper spray.
We decided to start sharing locations so I could track where she was.
Her close friend, Robert Koshland, says that sharing her phone's location was one of the few things Amie felt she could do to feel safe. The restraining order against Pursehouse had long expired, and because Pursehouse hadn't expressly threatened her, Robert says she didn't think going to police would help. Still, he says, Amie was very concerned.
That's when she said, "Look, if something happens to me, he did it."
She actually said that.
Yeah, no, she literally said that.
She's thinking that he can cause me harm, and the very next day, he finds her phone on the internet and starts texting her.
Gareth sent Amie a series of texts and later left her a tear-filled voicemail.
"I have so much I need to say. Please give me a chance to just say it. Please."
That's when prosecutors say Amie decided to block his number.
I believe up until that point, he was trying to manipulate his way back into her life at the point that she made the decision to block him. That was her choice, and she had that right to do that.
Prosecutors say Pursehouse started to plan to kill Amie on Valentine's Day.
Was that just a random date? Absolutely not. I think he wanted to make a statement by killing her on Valentine's Day.
On February 14, 2020, Amie went out with a group of friends around 7 p.m. 2 hours later, say prosecutors, surveillance cameras from her next-door neighbor's property were activated.
You get those Ring cameras that show a person that looks just like Gareth Pursehouse with gloves.
When he first comes into view, he covers the camera. And when the camera senses no more motion, it shuts off. And then he hops over the fence.
Into Amie's yard. Soon after, around 9 p.m., They believe Pursehouse broke through that French door.
And that's consistent with Michael Herman. He heard something breaking upstairs early in the evening.
And I think he just got into the house, cut himself. I don't think he even realized he cut himself.
Leaving that blood police later found nearby. DNA testing would confirm it belonged to Pursehouse. And Detective Masterson says where Pursehouse went next was revealed by Amie's unmade bed.
I think he climbed in her bed. He was there waiting for her for quite a while.
How creepy is that?
Crazy creepy.
That's where Masterson believes Amie found him 4 hours later when she arrived home a little after 1 a.m.
She walks into her bedroom, and I think she just froze in shock and fear. And the one thing that was on the bed was her phone. So I think she actually threw her phone at him and turned and started to run out of the bedroom. And she's screaming, and they're fighting and they're wrestling.
How hard did Amie fight for her life?
I think she fought with everything she had.
He had something that appeared to look like a bite mark on his bicep.
And Pursehouse also had that black eye.
To us, it was indicative of Amie fighting for her life, but she was obviously up against a much bigger, stronger opponent.
Prosecutors believe Pursehouse started choking Amie. And that's when Michael Herman yelled, they believe, catching Pursehouse by surprise.
And I think that plan was definitely thwarted by the unbeknownst presence of Michael Herman there. I just don't believe that he even knew that somebody was home.
In his panic, they believe Pursehouse dropped that syringe police found on the balcony. It was months before lab tests revealed what it contained: liquid nicotine.
A toxic poison that, if injected into someone, it would kill them.
Why kill her that way?
I mean, with that lethal dose of nicotine, people may not know what killed her. It may not be detected.
With his original plan interrupted, prosecutors believe that Pursehouse carried Amie, barely conscious after being strangled, to the third-story balcony.
He lifts her right over the rail and then drops her to kill her.
Gareth Pursehouse is caught on the neighbor's camera, hopping back over the fence. With their suspect and theory of the crime, the prosecutors were ready for trial. But they were surprised by Gareth Purshouse's defense, blaming Amie for what happened that night. In August 2023, more than 3 years after Amie Harwick's death, her accused killer, Gareth Pursehouse, went on trial.
I almost didn't recognize him.
Right.
In their opening statements, prosecutors Victor Avila and Catherine Mariano told jurors why and how they believe Pursehouse ended Amie's life in the early morning of February 15, 2020.
Dr. Amie Harwick was murdered by defendant Gareth Pursehouse because he was obsessed with her. He strangled her, lifted her up over the balcony, and dropped her to her death.
I just pray that Amie was unconscious when she went over the balcony.
Tom and Penny sat through every second of the trial, even the most graphic moments.
I need to know what happened to my daughter.
And we wanted to be there for Amie.
Yeah.
Through the whole ordeal.
But the Harwicks were not alone. Also in the courtroom, a small army of Amie's friends, including Rudy Torres.
This is the last thing I could ever do for her.
Although fortified by her friends, nothing could prepare the Harwicks to hear, for the first time ever, Gareth Purshouse's explanation about what happened the night Amie died. Defense attorney Evan Franzel claims that running into Amie in January 2020 at that award show had sent Pursehouse into, quote, a deep, debilitating depression, unquote. And the only way out of it was to talk to Amie on Valentine's Day 2020.
His only intention that night was to speak to her.
What was your reaction to that?
Bull, to put it bluntly. They're making up stories because they have no defense.
And as for that nicotine-filled syringe found at the crime scene, Purshouse's defense attorney says it wasn't for Amie.
He brought it intending to kill himself.
Why didn't he? No, he was on a mission to kill her.
He was wearing gloves when he went there. He covered up the cameras. What's the purpose in doing all that if you're going to kill yourself there in front of her?
In this trial,
The defense tells the jurors they will hear from an accident reconstructionist who will show that Amie fell on her own. Defense attorney Franzel then shows the jury two images: a screenshot of the reconstruction showing an animated figure hanging from the balcony, and an undated photo of Amie posing on top of a balcony railing.
you'll see that she had a certain comfort level with the balcony railing.
Beautiful young lady, wasn't she? She looked glorious.
What was your reaction?
Ridiculous.
I couldn't take it seriously. It was just so far-fetched to me.
She's been strangled, she's debilitated. So for her to then climb over a 3-foot rail, do all that, it doesn't seem reasonable. It seems actually unreasonable.
The defense's opening concludes with this damning admission.
Yes, Gareth Pursehouse was waiting in her home. He broke into her home. Had he not been there, she wouldn't have died that night. That is not in dispute. He set a chain of actions into motion that led to her death. But the evidence will show that he never intended on killing her.
Over the course of 10 days, the prosecution presented its evidence to prove that Gareth Pursehouse did intend to kill Amie Harwick. Dozens of witnesses testified for the state, including Detective Masterson, now retired, Robert Koechlin, and of course, Amie's roommate, Michael Herman, the man who heard it all. Michael described for the jury how after that incident on the red carpet, Amie had been concerned about those French doors that Pursehouse would later use to break into her home.
Amie had met with a handyman. I remember they were over by the glass doors, and Amie was pointing it out and telling him, we need to secure this.
Prosecutors also played for the jury this taped jail conversation between Pursehouse and his friends after his arrest.
I guess I'm officially a bad boy now, right? I've always been kind of...
Just a couple of weeks after he's been arrested for murder, he's laughing with his friends. You never hear any moment of concern for Amie during that call.
Yeah, so it's not great. I'm not getting out of here.
Why was that important?
I think that's one piece of evidence to show a consciousness of guilt. So he knows what's coming because the evidence shows what he did. It proves what he did.
When it was the defense's turn to present its case and call its expert witness to show how Amie's fall from the balcony was an accident, the defense suddenly rested without calling a single witness. Didn't that hurt the defense?
I am sure some jurors were wondering what happened, so I don't think that helps.
During closing arguments, defense attorney Robin Bernstein-Lev presented a new theory of what happened that night, that Amie may have attacked Pursehouse.
We don't know who initiated the physical confrontation. It is just as likely, if not likelier, she preemptively attacked Gareth Pursehouse in order to subdue him because she was afraid of him.
You see that all the time, don't you? A 115-pound lady picking a fight with a 230-pound, 6'4" man, just preposterous on its face.
Did that make you mad?
Oh, it took all my willpower to stay in that seat, to keep my mouth shut.
During the state's closing arguments, it's Amie Harwick who has the last word, with prosecutor Mariano reading from an email Amie wrote to herself hours after her January 2020 encounter with Pursehouse.
The night I felt very scared. Gareth came up behind me and started screaming.
I'm pretty nervous that I'm more on his radar now. It terrifies me that he's obsessed with me for 9 years, thinks about me every day. He's focused on harming me.
That's the closest we've ever had to a victim testifying in their murder. I thought it was extremely devastating.
Jurors had three choices: murder in the first degree, murder in the second, or the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter.
When it came time for deliberation, I think we all thought it would be rather quick. Day one went by, nothing.
I started getting a little worried and thinking, what could they be debating about?
What do you make of Gareth Purshouse's defense? See more evidence from the case at 48hours.com.
I felt nervous.
Yeah.
Because you never know.
As jurors met for a second day to decide Gareth Purshouse's fate, the waiting for a verdict began to weigh heavily on the prosecution.
It's incredibly nerve-wracking. The wait is the worst part.
And on Amie Harwick's friends and family.
And all you hear is just like a symphony of anxious bellies just grrr. So everybody's nervous.
But as court was about to adjourn,
We were walking out of the courthouse, and Rudy called down and said, everybody get up here, there's a verdict.
Is it correct that the jury has a verdict? You can hand the verdict forms over to the bailiff, please.
We, the jury, the above entitled action finding defendant Gareth Pursehouse guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
Gareth Pursehouse guilty of first-degree murder with a special circumstance of lying in wait.
What did you feel at that moment?
A huge relief. Huge relief. I just started crying and I couldn't stop. It was like, phew, finally, after all this time, he's going to be held accountable for what he did.
2 months later, Pursehouse was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He didn't say a word. Amy's friend, Robert Koshland.
Justice was rendered, and that's good, but we shouldn't be here at all. This should never have happened to begin with. The hole in our lives remains.
He's impacted so many people with his actions, so many people. He devastated our family.
A family that has grown. After the verdict, Tom gathered Amy's friends, the ones who have stood by them every step of this journey.
I said, you're not our friends, you're family. You really have become our family.
Could you have gotten through this without them?
No.
I don't think so.
It's a testament to the amazing life and community Amie Harwick created.
She was really happy. She was really happy that she had really gotten her life together. Man, we were all happy.
Michael Herman says he still keeps replaying that night.
She's gone, and I'm still here. You want a second chance. I'm still trying to save her.
Michael Herman has a lot of survivor's guilt.
Oh my goodness. He did the exact right thing.
He made all the right decisions.
Do you feel your sister got justice?
I feel she did.
Amy's brother, Chris.
We wish that she still could be here to continue to help people, because that's what she was all about.
We lost a friend, but so many other people lost a healer.
I think of Amie every day because she helped me so much.
Emily Sears says she's struggling without Amy's guidance.
It's just so hard to feel safe when this is the reality of what happened to her and what happens to so many people.
Amy's loved ones are hoping to change that reality. After her death, a petition was created to rewrite California domestic violence laws, including a statute preventing restraining orders from expiring.
And our biggest disappointment was it lost all its impact when COVID shut everything down.
Prosecutor Catherine Mariano acknowledges that there are limits to the legal system.
by the time it gets to our table, we're in a position to act reactively rather than proactively. But as a society, I think we can always do better, right?
After the trial, Amie's parents headed home to Pennsylvania, the place where they first became a family with their little girl, and watched her grow into the woman admired and now missed by so many.
What's the hardest part? Just the absence, the quiet.
One huge void, one huge void.
And I miss our adventures.
Adventures remembered when they visit Amie's grave.
And I couldn't get a brighter orange. I know orange was your favorite color, but this is the closest I could get. We're not the same people we were before, but we keep trying to be.
We miss you, Amie. Every day we think of you.
Anything you wish you had been able to say to her?
Just to tell her one more time that I love her. I know she knew it, but I wanted to be able to say it.
Four women at the breaking point.
We were desperate, in fear every day.
An investigative reporter comes to the rescue. Does he become the target?
This was a very personal attack. He is 100% our hero.
Who killed Jeff Gehrman? 48 Hours, Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
Hello, I'm Anne Marie Green, and this is Post-mortem. This week's case about the murder of Amie Harwick might be familiar to you if you're a longtime 48 Hours fan. This is actually the third hour 48 Hours has dedicated to Amie's story. So joining me today is the reporting team that covered this case from the beginning. Correspondent Erin Moriarty, producers Richie Fetzer, and Lauren White. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome, guys.
Well, we've been living this for 4 years, so we want to talk about this.
That's right.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having us.
I feel like I remember, Erin, when you first covered the first hour.
And we did it right away, the week afterwards. So let me take you back to that time. So it was the early morning hours of February 15, 2020, just as Valentine's Day was coming to a close. It was Hollywood Hills, LA. And Michael Herman calls 911 and he reports that his roommate, a woman by the name of Amie Harwick, had been attacked in their home. He's frantic. He has some blood on him. When the police get there, they find Amie Harwick. She's on the ground right below the balcony and she's barely clinging to life. Sadly, she dies then later at the hospital. Now, when it got lighter, when the police started looking around, it was clear that Mike Herman was right. Somebody had broken into the house. There was this shattered French door, signs of a struggle in Amie's room, and then there was the really strange piece of evidence, a syringe. They could not figure out what it was, and it took them a while to figure out what it was. It's important to know that Amie was like this amazing woman. She had had so many different lives. She was, at that time, a marriage and family therapist, but she had been an occasional photographer, a dancer, and model. In other words, she had a lot of friends, tons of friends, and most of them all said, if somebody attacked this woman, it could only be one person, a man by the name of Gareth Pursehouse, who was an old boyfriend.
Yeah, and not just an old boyfriend, an old problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, Amie's death made national headlines. She had been engaged at one point to Drew Carey. Everyone knows and loves Drew Carey, comedian. He's the host of The Price is Right on CBS. And so that brought a little sort of celebrity attention to it. But the story really became so much more because of the people that loved Amie. Her friends and family kept it alive, their advocacy work, their insistence on bringing the issue of domestic violence to the forefront of this case.
Well, because she really became a symbol in a way. This story had a big impact in LA and nationally because this was a woman who I mentioned was a marriage and family therapist. And she focused on helping women in toxic relationships. So if she could be attacked by a former boyfriend, all of us covering it thought, oh my God, is there safety for anyone?
Correct. I think looking at this case, Amie was just such a wonderful person and really did have all the tools necessary to succeed. And it's just such a shame that she didn't feel as though she could go to the police because Gareth hadn't explicitly threatened her. And so therefore she didn't feel like she could extend the restraining order, which had expired, which now that's a part of her friend's advocacy that restraining orders shouldn't expire.
Oh, totally. And I just wanted to say, Lauren booked one of Amy's clients, which brings up a good point because this is a woman who went to Amie for help.
Yeah.
She had experienced an abusive ex who had also stalked her. He'd broken into her home, and Amie helped her. So she talked to us in this hour about the fact that Amie had helped her and then she fell victim to this type of a crime. Completely took her safety away.
Yes.
Because the thing about it is Amie did everything right.
Right.
She saw it wasn't a good relationship. She got out. When she felt like she was being threatened, she went to the legal system. She got a restraining order. She had the psychological tools to know how to diffuse a situation. I mean, this is a woman that should have been sort of the poster girl for how you remove yourself from this toxic, abusive relationship.
Well, that's because the problem wasn't on Amy's part.
That's
it was
right.
the law.
That's
exactly.
The frailty of the law, the limitations of the law.
Yeah. Totally. So, Erin, you actually spoke to Drew Carey. I'm trying to go back in time because I feel like when we first talked about this, you didn't know if Drew Carey was going to be willing to talk to you or not.
Oh, not at all.
Yeah.
This was such a surprise because I was told, okay, he only has a very short time to talk to you. And so I was very nervous. I wanted to get all my questions out, but Drew Carey loved Amie Harwick and he wanted to talk. And there was one point where one of his people tried to, cut it off and he waved her away. He wanted to talk about her. He was proud of her. He loved the way that she helped women. He made such a point about that. And then, it was sad because they had broken up, but something we learned that just breaks our heart to this day. And I think breaks his. Right before Valentine's Day, they had not spoken for a while and she had texted him and they made plans to meet and she never got that chance because she was killed. And so, number one, we hear those stories, but we also learn, and he did not, brag about this. We learned from friends. After her death, he helped her parents go back and forth for the trial. He was there. He took her friends and made sure they got to the funeral.
He rented a bus for them so that they could go back and forth for the funeral.
He's a lovely man, and it is a testament to Amie. It really is. And so I will say, I love Drew Carey even more today because I just saw such a human side of him in an interview.
And I should let everyone know that interview was in 2022. That's when you were able to sit down and talk with him. So this hour also has a lot of new interviews and new evidence, like the police body cam footage from the crime scene that hadn't actually been included in the previous broadcast. How did you get all these new elements to update the hour?
So, a big part of it, we had the benefit this time of the trial had happened. So we actually had access to a lot of these elements. So in the past, when Erin, had covered this story and you're trying to make sense of a crime, now you can see it happening. So, or, the aftermath of it happening. And, it's great for us, making TV, but, there's also an emotional burden that goes into it because there's all these things that you've tried not to imagine and now you're actually seeing it. And it's really, upsetting and, frankly, I think makes you angry that this happened to her.
But it also helped in our reporting. We should make a very big point of that because when you see the body cam footage, now you understand that when the police got there, and you understand why, they didn't really know what had happened. So yes, her roommate, Michael Herman, was outside, but he had blood on him. And he said he's a roommate, but he doesn't have the keys to the house. So they're thinking, was this guy involved or was he not involved? They see this syringe. The young cops say, oh my God, that's heroin. That's what they think. So they think it might be a drug related. When the weathered lead detective Masterson shows up, he goes, that's not heroin, but they didn't know what it was. And so you really get a sense from looking at this evidence that we couldn't before of how difficult it was initially to get to the bottom of what happened to Amie Harwick.
Definitely.
That's a great point.
And, with the conclusion of the trial, what also happened is, the floodgates opened as far as people wanting to speak with us who had never spoken before. So, we have Detective Masterson, the lead homicide detective, the prosecutors, Michael Herman, who, really shout out to our booking producer, Michelle Fanucci. She has been in contact with Michael, since the very beginning. And I would call it, the soft touch and the long touch, where it was just, checking in with him, not pressuring him, letting him voice his frustrations or his concerns and really being there for him. And so when the trial concluded, he was ready. The same goes with the parents. We included a statement of theirs at the end of the first show in full, and they really appreciated that. And I think they remembered that. They did. They told us that. They told us that they remembered that. And that's what was a part of their thinking about participating this time around.
These were two people, Penny and Tom. They adopted Amie and her brother. They wanted these children.
Yeah.
So to make sense of why Amie was taken away, it took time for them to be able to talk. But I think they finally, after they saw that we cared about this case too, they decided that it was the best place for them to talk about this daughter that they loved and lost.
Mm-hmm.
She was so much a part of their lives.
Yeah.
They joke, she was into, heavy metal music when she was growing up, and they became metalheads because of her, And so imagine having that huge personality suddenly gone. And I think that's why it took them a long time to talk about it. But then when they did, and they smiled a lot, and because it kind of brought her back for that moment when they were allowed just to talk about her.
So let me ask you, at the end of the trial, you get access to all this evidence. Some of it's video evidence, so it works really well for TV. But then you have to sift through it.
Oof.
That must have been tough.
Very, especially, we talked about this, Amie, when the police get there, they call an ambulance, but the ambulance, they got lost. It took them a while to get to her. She's on the ground this whole time, and they're not touching her because they don't want to, cause more issues, cause more problems. She's just on this ground.
But worse, what upset me when I looked at it, and I was really disturbed by this, Michael Herman, who was a roommate, wants to go help her. He sees it for the first time on the ground, and he runs there, and they go, sir, sir, and they stop him. And in my head, I kept thinking, he didn't get to hold her hand.
Yeah.
I understand why the police, they didn't know whether he was was he the attacker? Was he involved? Was he not? They didn't know. But the idea that her roommate couldn't hold her hand still haunts me.
It is haunting.
And you see that in the video. We wouldn't have, unfortunately, that's what you're feeling as you're looking at this evidence that is now available to us.
I really felt for him.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
When you talked about the survivor's guilt in the hour, I thought I can totally understand it, because I imagine he must be going over that night. Why didn't I get up when I thought it was the cat? Why didn't I, react faster when I heard her yelling? Like it must have been so hard. And then to see the video and sort of relive that moment must have been tough.
And think about this too, Anne-Marie, not only just racking your brain about all the things you could have done, but this happened right before the pandemic and the lockdowns. And so he's by himself now, racked with this guilt, and now no way of being able to get help or to deal with it. So it just really compounded the issue for him.
I think in a lot of ways.
In the grief.
Yeah. I think he's his own worst critic.
100%.
And the isolation. I mean, he talked to us about pacing where he was, and he was like damaging his feet because he was like going over the night over and over and over again in his head. And it's really upsetting. I mean, Erin, when she interviewed him, had, an experience because you're facing him.
I was, interviewing him. That was the most raw, the most honest, the most painful interview that I had sat through, because even though Amie Harwick died in 2020 and we are interviewing him near the end of 2023, that time had not passed, and he was so raw. And sadly, even though he shouldn't, feels responsible that he couldn't save her. That was one of the toughest interviews I've had to do. We wanted to talk to him, but I didn't want to cause any more pain. I just wanted to kind of help him rather than cause pain.
I can totally understand that. A reminder that there are always so many victims.
100%.
Right. You did speak to Amy's parents. They were ready to speak on camera.
I love them. There was only one moment.
We all do.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
But they caught us off guard because, they're very proper. And Penny is a very proper woman. But when we asked her about the defense at the trial, she came out with a word that we were not expecting.
An improper word?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we had to bleep the word.
Yes.
And bleep part of the word.
Bullshit. I don't know if anyone else expected that reaction, because
No.
I surely did not.
But it could not have told the viewers more how she really felt about the defense. So it was appropriate from that perspective.
So another really interesting piece of evidence that you were able to show was a surveillance video of Gareth Pursehouse. And you see him walk up to the camera and then block it.
But did anyone, that was the first time I realized that you could put your hand over
I did
a
not know
camera
that.
I had
to
no idea.
stop the action
I didn't
of the
know that
camera.
either.
But you know what else that shows?
Foresight.
The thought.
Yeah.
Yes. The planning that went into it, that he planned to stop those cameras.
Yeah.
So on one hand, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. The other one was, oh my God, he did and he planned this.
But you know what? He was smart enough to know to wear gloves and to cover the cameras, but not smart enough to cover his face with a mask.
He didn't wear a mask.
He didn't wear a mask. That's very surprising.
I don't think he thought he'd get caught. I don't think he knew that Michael Herman was in the house.
Yeah.
And I think he thought, and we will get to the syringe, but I
Right.
think he thought he was going to get in, he was going to commit his crime and get out and never be found.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Another chilling new element of this hour is that voicemail from Pursehouse. He leaves it on Amy's phone after he just kind of happens to bump into her one night. I want to play a short clip.
Gareth sent Amy a series of texts and later left her a tear-filled voicemail.
I have so much I need to say. Please give me a chance to just say it. Please.
That's when prosecutors say Amy decided to block his number. I mean, at first when I heard that, I thought, oh, that, he sounds like a sad guy. You hear him crying. But then you start thinking, oh my God, he had not really talked to her. He hadn't dated her for 9 years and he's still so focused on her. And then it seems creepy. Then it's scary.
That's not normal.
It shows his obsession and how this obsession was sustained.
And also, he didn't.
Yeah.
It's not like he had her phone number still. He had to find her number online, and then starts texting her, and then leaves her this strange.
And she's texting back, giving a boundary.
Yes,
and then he will not stop.
She says, I think the way that we ended things, let's let that be. I don't want us to be enemies.
Yeah,
but I think this is a boundary I need to set, and let's not continue being in contact. And that was not enough.
Yeah,
that was not enough for him.
The exact advice she would have given to any of her clients.
Right.
So another detail not included in the hour was also later discovered that Pursehouse was texting another woman before he killed Amy.
If online dating wasn't hard enough. So these two women who have been talking to Gareth Pursehouse, unbeknownst to them, they're texting with him on Valentine's Day and they're all making jokes. And then right after Amy falls from the balcony, he's responding ha 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 to a woman. And then when he's arrested 13 hours after Amy's death, he's on a date with another woman.
How calculating, manipulative, and self-absorbed.
Yeah.
You know, that he took care of one problem in his head and he's moving on. Of course, I feel for those women. Can
Oh, I
you
can't even
imagine
imagine.
you're
Yes.
responding to somebody online and you find out that he's
I
accused
know.
of killing a past girlfriend? You know, that's...
You might want to shut down your dating profile and reassess.
Yeah. And then they had to testify.
Yeah, I was about, you took that out of my head. Yeah.
They had to testify in his murder trial to say, yes, these are the texts he was sending me. This is the date that we went on, because the woman that was on the date with him, she asked him about that black eye.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. He had a black eye. Prosecutors would argue from his fight with Amie, he attacks her and she's fighting back, fighting for her life. And that's what they're assuming the black eye came from. And, this woman is telling the police, I asked him about it. Where'd you get that black eye? And I think he had said to her, it was a shaving accident.
Yes.
I was shaving.
But didn't he say the police it was a home renovation problem?
He gave a different excuse to them. Yeah.
I was going to ask if he had been in any relationships in those 10 years.
I think he had, it's interesting, the change.org petition that the family created in Amy's memory. There's a woman that said, this could have been me. I was one of Gareth's relationships. This could have been me.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Gareth Pursehouse is charged with Amy's murder, and you're able to listen to and see the testimony. Amy's parents were there?
Every day. Every
second.
Every single day.
They were there through, and we all know from sitting through so many, sadly, so many murder trials, the graphic nature. This is about the defendant more than it is about the victim, sadly. And so you see the victim in ways that no parent should have to, but they felt they had to be there for her.
He had family there as well.
Oh, wow.
His mother.
So tell about that story, Lauren, because that to me struck me. We didn't know. We found out from Amy's mother.
Yeah, so she told Erin during the interview that during court one day, she said it was one of the harder days. She believes it was right after they showed the autopsy photos of Amie. And so Penny was leaving the courtroom and Gareth's mom stepped out and spoke to her. And we have a clip of that exchange that wasn't included in the hour.
She put her hand on my arm and leaned close and said, "I am just so very sorry for what's happened to your daughter." And all I could say to her was, "I know you would not have chosen this for your family." She's a victim, just like we were.
What a gracious woman.
So empathetic.
I'm sorry, that was another time, even hearing it, that I got all teary during the interview, because I thought, here is Penny, Amy's mother, worried about another mother whose son took away her daughter. I get teary just talking about it, but that tells you so much about Penny and Tom. They were very gracious, good people.
Talking to Tom and Penny, you start to see where Amie came from, especially
Very
Penny.
much.
She's this very... in charge person, and she speaks her mind, and see where her daughter came from.
Very impressive people.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. The defense put out an argument that, it was kind of, to me, and I'm not a lawyer, it seemed a little far-fetched.
Well, it's blame the victim defense.
Yeah.
It's the classic blame the victim.
Yeah. They were claiming that, Amie fell off the balcony on her own, and that Pursehouse brought the syringe filled with nicotine to take his own life. They used sort of proof that she fell off the balcony, this one picture of her sitting on a balcony.
Which they didn't even know. They haven't even been able to prove that that's her balcony. That could be any balcony,
I don't know anyone else's reaction, but when I saw them use this picture of her and try to use this in the defense, I had a visceral reaction to that. And we didn't speak to the jury, so we don't know what they were thinking. But you don't know if that type of strategy might have backfired, because it made me angry.
The idea saying, well, so she was so comfortable with that balcony, she might have just tried to slowly climb off and fell.
Right.
She was too badly attacked, according to the prosecutors,
Correct.
and in too bad a shape to have ever been able to get to the balcony by herself, let alone climb down.
Yes. But yes, that's what they used. And then even in the closings for his defense attorney Robin Bernstein-Lev to say, we don't know who initiated the physical altercation.
But let me just explain why they did that. They did that. I mean, it was a legal strategy.
Yeah.
So, he is charged with, basically first-degree murder, premeditated murder. And I think they were hoping the jury might wonder if he just wanted to talk to her, but in the heat of the moment, he ended up killing her. And then that might have been a little bit of a lesser charge, manslaughter. Voluntary manslaughter, which still carries a big term, but it's just so painful for the family and friends to hear that.
Did anybody talk more about the nicotine syringe? Because I don't think I can recall a nicotine syringe coming up in any 48 hours I've ever watched.
Oh, yeah.
No. Are you serious?
Yeah.
We're all looking at Erin.
Yeah,
Right.
and I should point out that the lead detective had seen our story years before, and that's how he realized that syringe that the first responders thought might be heroin was not heroin. It was nicotine.
You had another case like that?
I did, where a man was accused and convicted of killing his wife with a syringe of nicotine, and the theory being that, number one, they don't usually look for nicotine when they're doing an autopsy or a tox screen. And it's very easily obtained, particularly now when you can vape, you can get pure nicotine, and it can kill you. And unless a medical examiner notices because it's injected, unless they notice this little spot
Puncture.
on the body, they wouldn't have known what killed her.
Right.
That was according to prosecutors.
It took them months to figure out what that yellowish brown substance was. They had to send it to the FBI in the end to finally get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, they just don't test for it.
Right.
So fascinating. His defense presented not one single witness.
Which was a shock.
They promised to.
They promised.
They did.
They said they were going to have an expert. And
they showed an image from this reconstruction, but they never made good on that promise.
I wonder what happened.
So in opening statements in this case, the defense was presenting to the jury their theories, and one of them was this expert that was going to use these images to show that Amie fell. They used screen grabs of this computer-generated image showing a body. Kind of, it looks like it's hanging from the balcony, and it was supposed to, in their argument, illustrate how she fell, and that's how she got the injuries. But then we never really heard much more about it because they never presented that.
I assume they couldn't back up this reconstruction because they would have if they could have. And of course, he did not take the stand in his own defense.
And not even at sentencing?
No, he never spoke at sentencing. He never spoke throughout the whole trial process.
Of course, the big moment of this episode is that Pursehouse is finally found guilty of murdering Amie Harwick and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Tell us about the victim impact statement from Amie's mother, Penny.
So Penny Harwick gave a very moving statement about how Pursehouse, he broke into her home. His hands were filled with vitriol. And yes, he used his hands to harm Amie, but his were not the last hands to touch Amie. And so she talks about how the EMTs tried to help Amie, how the doctors tried to help Amie, the police. And then finally at the funeral, Penny and Tom tucked Amie in one last time into her casket and kissed her and touched her and said that how much they loved her.
That's tough.
Yeah.
It's moving.
Emotionally vulnerable.
Yes.
I mean, I can't imagine giving a public statement like that and having to do it. And also,
facing the man who did it.
Facing him. It was so eloquent. I mean, it's very quintessential who she is,
yes.
Making about her daughter and the loss. I mean, it was very impactful.
Once again, an exceptional hour. Thank you so much for joining us.
Very happy to be here, but it's hard for me to give a goodbye to Amie. Might be our last show.
Yeah.
I'm saying goodbye to her too.
Yes, it's such an honor. When Richie and I first worked on this in 2020, we were associate producers, and now to be the producers of this and be able to tell her story and hopefully tell it well, it really is just an honor to tell this woman's story.
I think honor is the word, and especially with the people that spoke to us, that they trusted us, and you just want to do right by them.
Well, thank you. Thank you again. Listen, everyone, join us next Tuesday for another postmortem and watch 48 Hours. Of course, it's Saturdays, 10, 9 Central on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus. And if you are liking the show, please rate and review 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts and follow 48 Hours wherever you get your podcasts. You can also listen ad-free on the Amazon Music and Wondery app or with the 48 Hours Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts.